Right, we now come to the urgent question. Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker, to ask the Secretary of State for FCDO if she'll make a statement on the actions taken to secure the elimination of Hamas from Gaza and the preservation of the ceasefire.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the House will be aware of events over the last 24 hours in Rafah, including reports that Israeli strikes took place last night. Estimates of the death toll vary, but suggest that up to 100 people in Gaza have been killed. We understand these strikes followed an attack yesterday afternoon, where responsibility remains unclear. As the Prime Minister said earlier, we echo the Americans in calling for urgent de-escalation and on all parties to keep the commitments they have made in the ceasefire agreement. We are clear that Hamas must release the bodies of all remaining Israeli hostages. The immediate priority is to ensure unrestricted flow of aid into Gaza. The Israeli government must urgently lift restrictions on aid entering, and international NGOs must be permitted to operate in Gaza to provide the scale of support that is needed. Civilians cannot wait. This government is working closely with our partners to do everything we can to support the transition from the ceasefire to phase 2 of the peace plan. This includes the disarmament of Hamas, the deployment of a ceasefire monitoring mission, an international security force, and the implementation of transitional governance arrangements in Gaza. We are clear there can be no role for Hamas in the future governance of the Strip. In recent days, the Foreign Secretary has spoken to the UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordination, Tom Fletcher, the Egyptian Foreign Minister, and the Israeli Foreign Minister about the importance of opening more crossings and removing restrictions on aid. And as I told the House yesterday, Mr. Speaker, both she and I will be heading to the region shortly. On the 13th to 15th of October, I co-hosted with the Egyptian government and the Palestinian Authority the first conference to look at how we can leverage sustainable support to Gaza's reconstruction. Britain will continue to play our full part in support of the ceasefire and the wider peace initiative. There is not a moment to lose to get relief at scale to those in need and to make progress on the pathway to a lasting peace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The situation in Gaza is fragile, and we all want the ceasefire to hold and endure, and for it to transition into a sustainable end to the conflict. But that requires the terms of the ceasefire being adhered to. The scenes of mass Hamas gunmen carrying out summary executions is sickening. Their continued hoarding and disruption of aid to starved Gazans is shocking. Their refusal to disarm is disturbing. And their failure to return bodies of the deceased hostages is distressing. They and their families deserve dignity of a proper burial. Their loved ones have already been through terrible, terrible pain and suffering. No more coffins should be released with the wrong remains, and this is a disgusting game that has to end immediately. So can the Minister explain what pressure is being exerted on Hamas by the UK government so they comply with the full terms of the agreement and release all deceased hostages? Yesterday it was reported that Hamas gunmen killed an IDF soldier, violating the ceasefire, leading to the targeted IDF action in response. What is the Minister's assessment of the threat Hamas poses? And what practical steps is the UK taking to support the disarming and elimination of Hamas and the terrorist infrastructure in Gaza? Yesterday, the Secretary of State said and told the House the UK has been proposing different ways to help in the process of decommissioning and disarming Hamas, using expertise we've built up over many years. So can the Minister now say what is Britain's specific role, as this is a unique situation that we see regarding Hamas, with terrorist infrastructure and threats funded by Iran across the region? What action is the government taking to rebuild its relationship with Israel, given the important partnership that we have with Israel? And on aid, what steps are being taken to increase getting aid into Gaza? And given the remarks by the US Secretary of State about UNRWA and its role in Gaza, what discussions have taken place with the United States administration about UNRWA's future and the implication for the UK following the government's decision to give it millions of pounds despite knowing some of these risks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say at the outset that we track events in Gaza incredibly carefully. I do not intend to give the House a running commentary on each and each and every individual incident that takes place, the situation remains very volatile and very messy. I hope not to disappoint honourable members if I avoid giving very specific answers on very specific incidents. There are structures now being put in place, including the CMCC, the Civilian Military Coordination Centre, which is playing a role in seeking to verify the facts on the ground where we can. That work obviously takes some time. The UK is making a contribution to it, but I won't wish to get ahead of that process from the dispatch box. What I will say is we have been absolutely clear on the threat that Hamas pose to Palestinians, to Israelis and to the wider world. That's why they're sanctioned as a terrorist organisation here. We are taking a range of measures with our partners to work through the very complicated but necessary steps, whether it's about transitional governance in Gaza, the security arrangements that need to follow, the international security force, and a whole range of other questions. I can assure the Shadow Foreign Secretary that we are deep in those discussions. We have been having them over the last few days, and we will have them in the region too. This is an incredibly complex piece of work, and we remain very focused on it. Mr. Speaker, just very quickly on aid, I would like to inform the House that there has been what appears to be quite a significant rate of aid going in particular through Kerem Shalom, which is very welcome, but the House will know of the centrality of the other crossings, particularly Rafah and the Allenby Bridge. They are not yet fully open. Aid cannot therefore flow in the volumes that we would wish to see them, and we continue to work with all our partners to try and see them reopened.
Mr. Speaker, welcome the statement from my honourable friend. But I say to him, though, it's fairly clear that the Israeli government only agreed to the peace deal because they felt they had to, not because they necessarily wanted to. And after all this time, we still haven't got aid flowing through into Gaza in the way we'd all want to see. So what further action can the government take to put pressure on the Israeli government to make sure that all the aid that's needed actually gets in and gets in quickly?
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a vital question for my honourable friend who follows these things closely. As I said in my last answer, to get to the volumes that we need, we are going to need both Rafah and the Allenby Bridge to be reopened. It is welcome that there does appear to be an increase of aid through Kerem Shalom, both UN aid and private trucks, and it is vital that the Palestinian private sector, particularly in Gaza, is able to get goods in, restart the market and enable people to go about their normal lives. We will, as you would expect, continue to work with all of our partners until we see the reopening of those crossings.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Callum Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The ceasefire was a rare moment of hope despite the challenges ahead, and so we share the dismay that extremists on both sides continue to look for opportunities to restart the war. We feel the distress of hostage families being tortured by Hamas cruelty and the grief of those whose family members, women and children, die under IDF bombs. The fake recovery of bodies by Hamas, as evidenced by the Red Cross, is a cruel and despicable act. Yet we can also see that extremists in the Netanyahu cabinet who have no interest in peace nor in the rights of Palestinian civilians are straining at the leash to retaliate. It is this cycle of violence and suffering that we must break. So I ask the Minister, what steps has the government taken to work with regional partners to force Hamas to find and return the remaining hostage bodies and to disarm? And given the importance of maintaining President Trump's interest and attention, what conversations has the Minister held with US counterparts to ensure that the White House does not lose focus on the prize of peace through a two-state solution?
I can reassure the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the British government remains in very regular contact at the highest levels with the American government on these questions, and the American government, as I think is clear in recent days, remains very focused on these issues, which is to be welcomed and to be supported, as the honourable member says. He raises important points about the recovery of bodies as well. I can confirm that I have been in talks with many of my opposite numbers across the region, most recently my Qatari opposites yesterday, as has the Foreign Secretary, and we continue to make these points with force.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And could I thank the Minister for his answering of the question. Could I say what a great job he does over time at updating our chamber. He's been terrific through this difficult period. Can I, though, ask him more about the type of aid that he thinks our country needs to send into Gaza to support the people there?
Members, I thank my honourable friend for his kind words. There are two areas where aid is going to be particularly vital. Of course, the immediate needs that the Gazan people have and the humanitarian programme to meet those needs. Most recently, in Sharm el-Sheikh, the Prime Minister announced a £20 million contribution focused on water, sanitation and health. But there is also a need for the sustainable reconstruction of Gaza. The message we hear so often from Palestinians is that they wish their own companies and their own private sector to be engaged in that endeavour. They don't simply wish to see the World Bank or the United Nations leading the charge. They too want to take agency of those questions, and that was one of the reasons we involved them so closely in the conference I held in October.
Kit Malthouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Once again, it is the children of Gaza who seem to be bearing the brunt of the violence, with reportedly 35 of them liquidated overnight in casual dropping of bombs in retaliation. Equally as shocking is to realise that there will be absolutely no accountability for these deaths whatsoever. Unlikely to be any investigation into the targeting or the intelligence that was used. No sense of any impunity or punishment for what is very obviously a significant crime. Allied to that, it's proven to be quite a handy distraction to the very significant violence and brutality that's taking place in the West Bank on a daily basis. So can I ask the Minister, please, given that we've now recognised Palestine as a sovereign nation, will there be any further measures to deter Israeli aggression on Palestinian soil?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, we've spoken on a number of occasions in this House about events in the West Bank, and we have announced 3 waves of sanctions, including at the most senior levels against the Israeli government. I want to reassure the House that we remain very much focused on settler violence. We are moving into the olive harvesting period, which, as the honourable member will know, is a period in which violence is often particularly high, and regrettably we are seeing similar trends this year, and I'll have more to say about that later in the day. In relation to his first point about individual incidents, I refer to my previous comments. It is really important at such a delicate moment for the ceasefire that we are as precise as possible, and that's why the CMCC is engaged in the way that it is.
Anna Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The International Court of Justice has called on Israel to allow aid into Gaza, announced its occupation of the Palestinian territories as unlawful and demanded the removal of troops. Does the Minister understand that so as long as there are boots on the ground and that UK arms are still sold to Israel, that there will not be the peace that is needed for the Palestinians unless they're allowed to determine their fate and to be free from the violence that they're continuing to face?
Minister.
I think the honourable member refers to the ICJ advisory opinion in relation to the occupied Palestinian territory. There has also, as the House will be aware, been another advisory opinion from the ICJ more recently in relation to aid accessing Gaza. So, assuming it's in relation to the first of those, we have taken very significant decisions since that advisory opinion, not least the recognition of a Palestinian state. And I just want to clarify for the House once again that no British weaponry is used in either Gaza or the West Bank, apart from subject to those measures in relation to F-35s that we've previously discussed.
Andrew Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Minister quite rightly said that Hamas must disarm and there can be no place for Hamas in the future of Gaza. And yet, the White House appears to be licensing Hamas to conduct internal security operations. What conversation is he having with his US counterparts to reconcile the UK position, which he clearly outlined, and that of the US?
Minister.
As the honourable member knows, disarmament is usually a process. It takes time, it requires great complexity and very serious technical work. We want to ensure that Gaza is free of Hamas, that they are disarmed. That will take time, and that is the work that both us and the Americans are engaged in.
Noah Law.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Both in Gaza, where grassroots peace builders will face the immense task of reconciliation, and here at home, where debate has become dangerously polarised, the peace plan and a two-state solution remain the only credible path forward. And we must all be absolutely clear in condemning Hamas, who have no place in the future governance of a free Palestine, and the atrocities continuing to be committed by Prime Minister Netanyahu's far-right government. So 2 wrongs, put simply, Madam Deputy Speaker, do not make a right. And I would urge the Minister to make a statement calling for unity at this fractious time.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for the question. There obviously have been innumerable wrongs in the region in recent months, and what is important is that we now continue the work, move forward with the ceasefire into phase 2 and see the wider peace plan fully implemented.
Leila Moran.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Throughout this horrific 2 years, I have kept trying to make the case for the innocents, for the people who did not choose any of this, who are not responsible. It is completely unacceptable that Hamas has not released all of the bodies. And it is equally unacceptable that the Israeli authorities released 100 Palestinian bodies with just numbers. What is this government doing to help the Palestinian authorities identify all the bodies in both Israel and Palestine who have been returned, so that those families can grieve and the dead can get the dignity that they deserve?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable member speaks with personal experience, real force, and obviously a very long track record on these issues. My heart goes out to families on both sides. Mortuary processes are difficult in the best of times, and one can only imagine the agonies that they are facing. We're not aware of specific requests to us for support on mortuary services, but if there are some, I'm very happy to consider them.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let us be clear. Peace cannot exist under impunity. Weeks into the ceasefire, Israel has once again bombed Gaza, killing over 100 Palestinians, including over 35 children, as it continues its genocide. More than a year and a half after the International Court of Justice's substantial ruling, which frankly and shamefully our government has still to reply to, which made it absolutely clear any government allowing trade with Israel's settlement economy is complicit in sustaining its continued illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories. British companies continue to trade in goods and financial services with those settlements, undermining our obligation under international law. So can the Minister tell us, when will the government suspend the UK-Israel trade deal and end all trade linked to the settlements, or will he continue to sit back and allow this complicity?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, since the ICJ advisory opinion that's been referred to, I wouldn't want the House to have the impression that the British government has done nothing. We have, at the centre of that advisory opinion, is the question of the status of the occupied Palestinian territory. We have been clear subsequently in recognising a state, what the status of that territory is. He raises important questions about the trade of goods with settlements. We do not accept trade with settlements on the same basis that we do trade with Israel. It is where British companies are doing so, they are in breach of the trading arrangements. HMRC will take an interest. They need to ensure that they know who they are trading with and in which territory. It is obviously difficult, as a whole range of nations and states have found, to ensure that if in settlements people wish to falsely label where the thing is produced, it is very difficult for others to then be able to determine. And I know he follows these issues very closely. He will no doubt be interested in the efforts of the Irish government in order to try and pass exactly the kind of legislation that he is describing and the very many difficulties that they have encountered in so doing. We are not in breach of our international obligations. If the honourable member would like to point me to some legislation which does what he says, which is in operation, I'd be grateful to see it. But I think this is one of those questions where we need to continue to work with our partners to ensure that the status of the occupied Palestinian territory, part of the Palestinian state, is understood by all.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On top of the absolute imperative of Hamas releasing the remaining hostage bodies, on top of ensuring Hamas not only completely disarms but is removed from all governance in Gaza, will the Minister agree with me that there also needs to be a widespread de-radicalisation programme to undo the damage that has been done by innocent children in Gaza being taught in their textbooks, some of which were funded through UNRWA as an uncomfortable truth, to hate Israel and to hate Jews. That de-radicalisation must happen also.
Minister.
There has been much work done in recent months, including under this government, in relation to the curriculum in Gaza. I'm aware of the concerns that have been raised about it. The funding to UNRWA that we have provided, which the Shadow Foreign Secretary referred to, included specific provision for ensuring that all of the reforms identified in the Kelowna report, including in relation to curriculums, were followed through, and we continue to engage with UNRWA on those questions.
Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My colleagues have already asked about the current horror in Gaza, so I'm going to pivot to the longer term. Before this crisis, we saw decades of legal settlements on Palestinian territory. So I welcomed the government's sanctions on extremist settlers and Israeli ministers. But I don't want us to lose sight of this issue, Madam Deputy Speaker. So can I ask the Minister to consider what further steps he can take, including trade restrictions, to combat illegal settlements?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. There has been a significant increase in settlements and violence associated with those settlements. This is a continued problem, and we will continue to work at it alongside our partners to try and see this terrible trend reversed.
Stephen Flynn.
I get the impression that the Minister shares my despair at what feels like the constant impediments to real progress that are being put in place both by the impunity of Hamas but also by the impunity of Benjamin Netanyahu's genocidal regime. But I am curious. The United States of America have indicated that the response from Israel last night was proportionate and they backed the action. Is that a view shared by His Majesty's government?
Minister.
For the reasons, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I said earlier, I'm reluctant to be drawn in a day-by-day commentary on the actions of both sides. What is key is that we keep the ceasefire going. That is what the Americans have been clear is still in place. This is going to be difficult. The events of the last 24 hours have been difficult. I am sure that we will have further difficult days ahead. This is not a straightforward path. I won't be drawn on an individual instance today if he doesn't.
Stella Creasy, after which I will call Steve Darling. Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. But further to my honourable friend's answer, it's now 19 days since October the 10th, and it's very clear there are still hostage families who cannot grieve for a loved one. There are still people starving in Gaza because there is not enough aid, and now we are seeing the West Bank deteriorate. Now, what we saw in the last 24 hours, the Vice President argued that skirmishes are somehow inevitable. With the greatest will in the world, the death of 35 children and possibly more is not a skirmish. If the international community can do anything, it is to be involved in the detail of ensuring that the ceasefire holds. So if he won't tell us what the government's response to it will he at least tell us what possible justification the Israelis have given for the latest incident?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't wish to spend too much time at the dispatch box repeating the statements of others. I'm sure the honourable member who follows this closely will have seen what the Israeli government provided as justification. I'm sure she will have seen the statements from Hamas denying that they were involved in the shooting in Rafah and the considerable uncertainty, I think, that has surrounded some of those events. The key question here for the British government is whether or not we think the ceasefire can hold, whether or not we think we can make the progress, all of the progress that she is describing on reopening the aid crossings, disarming Hamas, the transitional governance arrangements. I am not for 1 second taking away from the gravity of these incidents. Lives have been lost, children have been killed. But the role that stands before the British government at the moment is to ensure that we do not have a breakdown of this ceasefire. That does not mean we do not get into the detail. We have a Major General in the CMCC who is part of the efforts trying to ensure that when threats to the ceasefire, when violence occurs, we understand who and why, but I won't give running commentary from the dispatch box until we are in a position to do so.
Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister has already acknowledged that it is the olive harvest season in the West Bank, a harvest that supports approximately 100,000 farming Palestinians. And yet we're seeing
more than 150 attacks by settlers against these farmers. How is the government holding the Israeli government to account to stop these settlers acting with impunity?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I've already said, clearly, as the honourable member rightly identifies, this is a period of particular danger. The increase in violence associated with settlements is something that we have condemned repeatedly, made sanctions against, and we will continue to make these points strongly, including this harvest season, as we did the last.
Samantha Niblett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. All members of this House have been appalled by the scenes that emerged from Gaza in the wake of the ceasefire, showing Hamas executing people in the streets as they seek to reassert control over the area. So does the Minister agree with me that those scenes simply reinforce that Hamas are nothing but terrorists and murderers, and that they must have nothing to do with the future governance of Palestine?
So,
I do agree with my honourable friend. The scenes we have seen, which the Shadow Foreign Secretary referred to in her question, are chilling. Hamas are terrorists. They can have no role. The work to remove them and disarm them will not be easy, but it is vital and it is the necessary next step.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday it emerged that actually Hamas do know where the bodies of the remaining hostages are, as video evidence emerged of them playing games with one body, removing it from a building, burying it, then bringing along the International Red Cross and pretending that it had found it and dug it up. Does the Minister and the Government condemn this, and what more can the Government do with our international allies and the Gulf nations to put pressure and leverage on Hamas to return all of the remaining bodies immediately?
Minister.
The honourable member is right. Hamas must return all of the bodies immediately. We have made that point to our regional partners with force, and we will continue to do so.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The war crimes carried out by Israel last night, including the killing of 35 children, are a continuation of the horrors that we've seen over the last 2 years, visited upon the people of Palestine by a state led by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is currently wanted for war crimes. The government quite rightly brought wide-ranging sanctions on Russia for its unlawful invasion of Ukraine and its war crimes. But isn't the truth that unless there are real consequences to Netanyahu and Israel for these war crimes, they will carry on, because a lack of action, a lack of sanctions is giving them the green light and treating them with kid gloves? So isn't now the time for extensive, widespread sanctions on Israel? And why are they treated differently to Russia? And why is Netanyahu treated differently to Putin?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we've discussed sanctions in this House many times, including the 3 waves under the time of my government, including against 2 ministers. Clearly, the priority now has to be to make the ceasefire work, to move into phase 2, to get through all of these incredibly important and incredibly complex questions, and that is the focus of this government.
Wendy Chamberlain. You should be able to, because
over the past decade there's been a stark absence of diplomatic efforts to address the core issues of the conflict and the continued advocacy for a two-state solution, and civil society organisations have played a vital role during this time entering that chasm. Will the Minister outline how is providing help to these organisations, and will it, for example, be through the recently announced International Fund for Israeli-Palestinian Peace?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for the questions. We remain focused on supporting a whole range of civil society. She will be aware of some of the proposals in the Knesset which we have opposed and which I referred to in my opening remarks. We will continue to conduct that work, and we'll have more to say about the fund she refers to in the coming days and weeks.
Dame Chianwara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The ceasefire has been one of the few positive achievements in what has been an unending tale of misery, violence and horrific suffering. And all those involved in achieving that ceasefire deserve the gratitude and the recognition that has been received. But now, as Israel continues to kill Gazan children and Hamas refuses to disarm, could the Minister reassure us that everyone involved in achieving the ceasefire in the US, the UK and in the Middle East is equally concentrated and focused on keeping the peace and making the ceasefire work as the beginning of a peace process, and further that given our recognition of the Palestine, that the Palestinian voice will be heard from.
I'd like to reassure the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I am absolutely certain that everyone in the UK working on this is focused on making sure the ceasefire sticks in the way that my honourable friend asks, and indeed I can tell from our many contacts with the American system too that they remain similarly focused. They want this ceasefire to stick, and they are working to try and ensure that it does.
Colin Lockhart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Minister give assurances to this House that this Government is utterly committed, along with our international allies, to eradicate Hamas's terrorist infrastructure and will not cease until they have been fully dismantled and obliterated and their remains of those hostages murdered in captivity have been returned?
Yeah. I thank the honourable member for the question, and as I said to my colleague from Lincolnshire, we are committed to ensuring that those bodies return. We are committed to ensuring that Hamas are disarmed. The infrastructure of Hamas is not just, as has been the case in other conflicts, heavy weapons, small weapons. It is also clearly a network of tunnels under Gaza which have posed a very significant threat to Israel. That is a very difficult and complex engineering and military task, but it is one that needs to be included as part of this process.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I strongly welcome the Minister's commitment to work to support evening scholars to leave Gaza, and the decision particularly to extend the support to students with full scholarships. Can the Minister update the House on the latest steps the Government has taken to support Gazan students who wish to study in the UK, particularly those like the ones I'm aware of and that I've been arguing about, who have dependents who they understandably do not wish to leave in Gaza?
Madam Deputy Speaker, if you'll permit me, I might just say a little bit about the wider evacuation operations. They have continued, including on Monday and Tuesday of this week, when both students, as my honourable friend has been so doughty in pursuing, but also those children who are highly medically vulnerable and who can benefit from UK support. That work, indeed alongside my colleague from the Health Ministry, continues. We have been able to help many people get to the UK to transform their lives, to get the vital medical assistance and educational opportunities which I hope will provide for all of those people to make a real contribution to the future of Palestine. These have been incredibly complex operations, not least given the closures of getting people in and out of Gaza under the most recent period. We have, I'm afraid, very strict limits on how many dependents anyone can bring out. We have made updates to our policy in relation to those students who are fully funded, in which we can support a very small number of dependents to leave. I know many in the House with an interest have engaged with me directly on these questions. I would, I'm afraid, reiterate that these operations remain incredibly complex. I'm happy to talk to all members with an interest. There is neither infinite capacity in the UK to support, nor is there, even with our partners, unlimited capacity to get people out. So we have made an announcement, and I pay tribute to the work of my honourable friend and many others across this House on those questions, but I'd wish to keep people's expectations suitably focused on the very many constraints that remain on these operations.
Monica Harding.
Madam Deputy Speaker, renewed violence in Gaza continues against a backdrop of unimaginable human suffering. Millions remain in desperate need of food, water and medical supplies, yet aid convoys continue to face unacceptable obstacles. The UN reported yesterday that many of the 177 aid trucks that entered Karim Shalom were limited by congestion on coastal roads, in part because of the damage to that aid route. This means that they were forced to limit their supply of aid far below of what was agreed. And yet, aid routes are not fully open. Gazans cannot wait any longer. Aid restrictions should never have been there in the first place. So what specific pressure is the government exerting on Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli authorities to get the routes open fully and the aid in?
The honourable member asked important questions there. As I said earlier, it is welcome that there has been an increase in Keren Shalom, that there is congestion too. It is the UN, the private sector and a number of donors who aren't using the UN who are all trying to get in aid through Keren Shalom. So the congestion she describes is perhaps to be expected. What is vital is that the other routes reopen too. That's both the Allenby Bridge with Jordan and, of course, Rafah, which has been the subject of so much discussion already. We are working with our partners on these questions. We want to see progress soon. I would like to see it in days. This has proved to be more complex than I had hoped, and talks are ongoing.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to place on record my thanks for the tireless work of the Minister on the issues in the Middle East. But the devastation continues for Palestinian people living in Gaza, whether it's the murderous intent of Hamas or the 104 people who were killed under further strikes from Israel, including 46 children, as it's been reported overnight. Alongside this, Gaza's healthcare system has been decimated. So, and it's always women and girls, of course, who ended up as the worst victims in these circumstances. So could the Minister agree with me and update me about how further aid can be directed to support particularly women and girls and supporting the rebuild of the healthcare systems out there?
Minister.
These are vital questions from my honourable friend, who I know has remained very focused on these issues. Myself and the Health Minister, who's kindly joined me at the front bench, remain very focused on these issues. As access to Gaza becomes easier, as we all hope that it does, clearly amongst the most urgent questions are ensuring medical supplies, medical personnel and indeed medical infrastructure is in place to meet the very significant needs of the Gazan people, and we'll continue to work closely on that.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For every day since the ceasefire took place, at least 20 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed by the IDF. There's been numerous other breaches of the ceasefire and continued military activity in the West Bank. Could the Minister assure the House that Britain no longer flies RAF planes over Gaza, no longer cooperates with Israel on its security arrangements, and no longer supplies any weapons to Israel because of their frequent breaches of the ceasefire and their continued abuse of the people of Gaza and of the West Bank?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've set out our arrangements in relation to arms and the very significant suspensions that we made from this dispatch box a number of times. They remain in place. The honourable member, the right honourable member, forgive me, asks about flights of the RAF. I think he refers to the RAF flights that were attempting to find hostages in Gaza. They have stopped. The hostages have been released. There's no further function for those flights, so they have ended.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One crucial factor in achieving the current ceasefire was the unprecedented declaration at the end of July by all 22 members of the Arab League, calling on Hamas to release the hostages, lay down its arms and give up power in Gaza. That was hugely important in showing Hamas that they had run out of road. So can I ask the Minister what role the UK and our partners had in implementing that declaration? And does he agree that our strong diplomatic relations led by our excellent diplomats do have a positive impact?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I associate myself very much with the comments of my honourable friend who knows the neck of the woods well. Our diplomats are excellent. I was very pleased in July to be in New York when the declaration he describes was made. It was obviously part of a declaration which included our own commitments in relation to a Palestinian state, commitments which led to our recognition in September.
Chris Coughlin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We all hope desperately for a just peace in Gaza. I served alongside the Minister as diplomat in the Middle East and as a soldier. Given that, I particularly welcome the proposed international security force, but it is essential in my view that such a force includes troops from Arab countries, possibly Western countries too, to reassure the Israelis, and crucially is there for long-term and ready to take casualties. So can the Minister update the House on what progress, composition and the mandate of the potential force would be?
Minister.
My gallant friend, I think, I'm sure Madam Deputy Speaker will correct me if I've got that wrong, is right to focus on some of these very practical questions. He, like I, served in countries where peacekeeping forces were unable to keep the peace and were unwilling to take casualties and unable, therefore, to fulfil their mandate. These are all some of the most central and most delicate questions around the ISF. I hope he'll forgive me if I won't give him a detailed commentary at this time, but I expect to return to this House to provide more detail when I'm able.
Baran Moon.
Deputy Speaker, there have been recent reports, press reports, that the Israeli government has been arming factions within Gaza in order to destabilise Hamas. Can the Minister comment on any of these reports, and what is the British government's position on this?
Minister.
As I said earlier, Madam Speaker, I won't provide extensive commentary on reports, but clearly safety and security for Gazans is going to involve Palestinian authorities able to ensure law and order. Those who have been living in Gaza have suffered terribly. There has been widespread looting, widespread violence. Who those factions and criminals are and who is supporting them will, I'm sure, be a question over which many will pore. The key thing now is that security needs to return to Gaza, that security cannot be provided by the masked Hamas gunmen that the Shadow Foreign Secretary rightly referred to at the outset. And so that work continues.
Ben Lake.
The Minister has rightly emphasised the importance of securing swift and urgent supply of aid to all those in need in Gaza, but has also mentioned that some of the crossings remain disrupted or indeed fully closed. Can I ask him what reasons have been given for the continued delay in reopening all of the crossings?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there has been, I think, some public reporting of the Israeli concerns about the Allenby Bridge, particularly after violence there. Rafah has been a subject which we've discussed many times in this House. It remains an absolutely critical artery. It is true to say in both the Allenby crossing and Rafah, there will need to be agreement between both countries. I hope that agreement can be secured quickly. I hope that Israel remove the restrictions that are in place and that we do see the free flow of aid through those crossings very shortly.
Dr Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his statement and for his focus on maintaining the ceasefire. I stand in solidarity with the many ordinary Palestinians living under Hamas and also with the families in Israel waiting for their loved ones to be returned. But I cannot conclude that what Netanyahu did in the last 24 hours is proportionate in any way. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do continue to hope and pray for peace, and with peace will come the opportunity to rebuild Gaza. But I can't see how that can be done when Israel holds so many people without charge, so many people, particularly healthcare workers. And my constituent Iman is really concerned about Dr Hussam Abu Safia and him being held. So does he agree it's really important that people should not be held without charge, particularly the healthcare workers? And is he having negotiations with Israel on their release?
Minister.
Due process is incredibly important. I've raised this case, this specific case, with the Israeli authorities, and it is important that where people are detained, particularly where doctors are detained who are providing vital life-saving work, that adequate explanations are provided. We will continue to take this matter up with the Israelis.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Overnight, more than 100 Palestinian civilians were killed by Israeli airstrikes. Once again, innocent civilians are suffering a collective punishment, this time imposed for breaches of the ceasefire by Hamas. Unless this government believes that all Palestinian civilians are Hamas and therefore are legitimate targets, he must unequivocally condemn these attacks on innocent civilians. So will he unequivocally condemn these attacks, and will he call them what they are, an egregious breach of international humanitarian law?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think I've covered these questions already in the session, but let me be absolutely clear. All Palestinians are very clearly not part of Hamas. That so many Palestinians want to see an alternative. They want to see this process succeed. They want to see the ceasefire hold. That is where our focus is.
Richard Ford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Israeli Defence Forces said this morning that they had, quote, renewed enforcement of the ceasefire. The strikes are reported to have killed 20 women and 46 children following the death of one IDF soldier. President Trump's peace plan makes provision for Arab states to commit stabilisation forces. And I appreciate the Minister's point that he cannot provide a running commentary on such a stabilisation force, but does he share my view that after a ceasefire, the protagonists are the least well placed to enforce peace?
I'm not sure I totally followed. The composition of the ISF is not yet determined. As I said to his colleague, we will no doubt discuss this further in the House once we're in a position to provide a fuller update. There have been a number of states that have indicated some willingness to provide troops to the ISF. I want to just clarify for the House that we have provided military personnel into the region, but that is into the CMCC, the Civil Military Coordination Centre, which has a different tasking than the ISF. These are all complex questions, very much in negotiation at the moment, and when some of those matters are more clear and more finalised, then I'm happy to return to the House.
Adrian Ramsey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is horrifying that Netanyahu has bombed Gaza in this clear violation of the ceasefire. The suffering in Gaza is unimaginable, and to move forward, we must demand justice and reparations for all victims of atrocity crimes and hold to account the perpetrators. So what is the government doing to uphold UK obligations under international law to bring to justice those responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide? And also, what is the government doing to push for journalists to be allowed in, given the Israeli government's outrageous restrictions preventing them from documenting the horrors?
Minister.
International justice and accountability is of vital importance, Madam Deputy Speaker. That is why this government removed the block on the ICC. It's why we continue to support that very important body, why we continue to support the ICJ. They are the competent courts. They are the process by which justice will be secured, and we continue to support them in those endeavours.
Jim Allister.
Are we expected to believe that in the months and years ahead, the government will stand by its promise that Hamas must be fully disarmed and play no part in the government in Palestine? I ask because a previous Labour government under Tony Blair, with the present National Security Advisor by his side, promised the people of Northern Ireland that the IRA and other terrorists would be totally disarmed through decommissioning. It didn't happen. Supposedly decommissioned weapons continued to be able to be used to kill, and we ended up with the surrogates of the IRA in government. Will it be any different in Gaza?
Minister.
One thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have learnt so far as a politician is not to make comparisons between the Middle East and practically anywhere else, and certainly not the Northern Ireland. So I'll allow the Northern Ireland Secretary of State to answer his particular questions about the current arrangements. Clearly, peace is possible. We've demonstrated it here. We've demonstrated it in many other places. That has to be the work of the government, and that's what we're focused on.
Shakat Adam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like previous announcements on ceasefire, it appears this one is going in the same vein. Primarily, one side, the Palestinians seize, whilst the other Israelis continue to fire. 20 Palestinians have been killed every single day since this so-called last ceasefire. Last night being the most violent, with over 104 Palestinians killed, including a targeting of a cancer patient camp. We all appreciate the Minister coming in, week out, to answer these questions. I certainly do. But given the UK has not stopped arming Israel since the genocide began, can he confirm how many export licences to Israel have been granted in Labour's time in office?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope the honourable member will forgive me that I don't have the numbers precisely to hand. I did do an extensive hearing in front of the Select Committee where we went through the numbers in some detail. But let me just focus on the key point. We have suspended all arms that could be used in this way. We are not selling bombs or bullets that could be used in Gaza, could be used in the West Bank. So the munitions that he and so many others in this country saw on their television screens exploding last night were not British.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his answers, for his tone and indeed for his well-chosen words. We do appreciate that. The moment reports of shots fired at Israeli soldiers in Rafah were reported, IDF soldier murdered. My heart sank, as indeed many others did, probably did as well, because I knew that 10 years peace had been broken by Hamas. So does the Minister accept that the retaliation is inevitable? And what role can government play, along with our allies, to rebuild the fragile peace process, disarm Hamas, remove their weapons, destroy them, and then real peace, lasting peace, can actually happen?
Minister.
Madam Deputy, I thank the honourable member for his important question and, as ever, courteous tone. The work is important. The threats to the ceasefire are many and varied. We will continue to work with our partners in exactly the way he describes.
And that concludes the urgent question. I'll just give the front benches a few moments to change over.